All right, we are live.
Thanks, Megan. Welcome back, everyone. We are returning from recess on the regular meeting of the Kentucky Board of Education, August 5th, 2021. The next item on our agenda, picking up with the regular regulation based on the emergency one we discussed right before break. Again, with us is Associate Commissioner Robin Kinney, and this time and also with Matt Ross, Executive Advisor in Robin's department, and they're going to walk us through 702 KAR 1:191 and the permanent regulatory changes they're recommending.
Thank you again, Chair Young. I'm not going to go over a lot of the information that we shared earlier. I think we'll just go through this regulation. This is a regulation that is companion to the e-regulation, but it is a little different. The emergency regulation will go into effect more immediately to allow for this school year. But because of that statutory requirement that we discussed about before lunch, we wanted to have a regulation in place for the future, looking forward to situations of quarantine. I'll preface our discussion on the regular regulation that we are trying to be really optimistic that we're going to go back to a more normal course as it relates to any type of quarantine that would impact our students or our staff. So you'll see that reflected in the regular regulation. And if I could ask Meredith, if she is on, to move us to section 1 of the regulation, if we could also have that up on the screen so we can look at it as we talk through the regulation. Also, as a reminder, for regular regulations, they do take a long time to get put in place. There is likely between 7 to 9 months to get a regular regulation all the way through the formal process, through the public comment periods, through the legislative review. And so there will be adequate and ample opportunity for comment to the regular regulation.
So Robin, I am working to do that. It appears that in the portal, I inadvertently replaced the one that was in there with the updated one for the emergency. So I do apologize to the board members for that, but I will get the correct one pulled up here momentarily.
Okay. I can quickly talk about the differences, and then we can, reflecting back on our earlier discussion about what we've already talked about. So you'll see in the regular regulation, we have removed those specific references to COVID or COVID variants. So because this is to really cover quarantines of any kind. Thank you, Meredith. It looks like you're rolling right along there. If I can ask you to scroll down just a little further to section 1. There it is at the bottom of page 1. Thank you so much.
And Meredith, I believe the one in the portal that we have is the correct one. I'm looking at now. So
okay.
Oh, good. Okay, well, maybe I'm just clicking on the wrong one. That's good news.
Okay, good news on that front. So section 1 under quarantine leave, you'll still see some of the provisions that we saw in the emergency regulation, but we are shifting to where each district board of education is going to adopt policies around quarantine for infectious or contagious diseases. So you see that we've taken out the reference to COVID-19. And it is applicable to every eligible full or part-time employee, again, in the school district, and does provide for paid leave during the period the employee is ordered to quarantine. This leave also shall be in addition to any other leave provided by statute or board policy. Meredith, if you can continue to scroll down just a little bit, and we'll go to the next, right there. So in order to be eligible for leave under this section, you'll see, again, very familiar language we saw from the last regulation, emergency regulation, but let me call out a difference in 2A. So here we say, be ordered to quarantine due to infectious or contagious disease exposure by a treating medical professional, a public health department, or the Department for Public Health. All those were in the emergency regulation, but you'll see we've taken out the school district determining that quarantine in this regulation. And the thought around that, we really want to get back to those medical professionals when we get back to a normal state, making those determinations, get our school districts out of the business of contact tracing and all that. We're really hopeful and optimistic. And there will still is the possibility outside of COVID, of course, that they may have to quarantine. And we'd rather those medical professionals be making those calls and hope that they are few and far between. The next part of 2B, again, trying to return to a more normal course of action. 2B requires, in order to be eligible, the employee shall have exhausted all their accumulated sick leave or be ineligible to utilize that accumulated sick leave provided to the employee pursuant to statute and local board policy. So that is the way we operate right now. So we're trying to get back to a more normal course of action. Again, trying to be really optimistic that we're not going to have the extenuating circumstances of COVID like we've had in the. And of course, we'll also have our other opportunity as we move through this school year. If something should change, we could always come back and react to that. But this is a regulation trying to be optimistic about our opportunities in the next school year. You'll see in 3 and 4, we have the same indication about written documentation, both from the district and also from getting the district proof from the employee that one of those 3 entities up at the top have determined that quarantine. So that's the documentation portion. And again, you have that same language that we had from the last time about if an employee can fulfill their job responsibilities remotely, then the district can require that to happen, and then leave would not be utilized. And then finally, you have the section about the leave granted shall not accumulate or carry over. We had that discussion a little bit earlier. And yeah, keep scrolling down. So all that looks very much like the last provision. And what you do not see included in this regulation from the last one was that section 7 that was in our emergency reg. And that was about the testing, that the local board could do that. And the reason that has been omitted from this regulation is, if we'll think back to section 1, the local board is adopting those policies anyway. So they can adopt those policies and include that provision from section 7 if they so choose, which is to require that earlier testing. So this is really shifting back under the emergency reg. The department and the board have drafted sort of the parameters around it. With the regular reg, we're shifting that back to the local school district to have those policies put in place with certain parameters as defined by this regulation. So let me pause there for just a minute and see if there are questions about this regulation.
Madam Chair, I move approval of this regulation.
Madam Chair, I think you're muted.
Oh, thank you so much. I was having a great conversation. We have a motion from Dr. Robinson to approve this amendment. Do we have a second?
This is Holly Bloodworth. I second.
Thank you, Ms. Bloodworth. Any further discussion? Any other questions you may have for Robin? All right, thank you. Meredith, would you please call the roll?
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson.
Alvis Johnson, yes.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, yes.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, yes. Excellent. Thank you so much, Robin and team, for your work on both of those regulations. We really appreciate it. At this time, the next item is the approval of emergency amendment to that reg I was working on earlier, 702 KAR 7:125E also denoting an emergency regulation around pupil attendance. Joining Robin for this conversation is Division Director Che Ritter, and along with Matt Ross as well. Take it away, team.
Thank you again, Chair Young. Finishing the discussion about trying to have adequate provisions in place for our staff for quarantine, now we're going to turn to quarantine for our students. We really hope through all the mitigation strategies and the good work being done by our local school districts, our teachers, our students, and the staff, that we won't have to go into quarantine status. But this is something that we want to have in place in case it does happen. Despite those best efforts, we still may see students that need to be quarantined for the safety of both themselves and for the other students and staff in the school. So we bring before you this emergency regulation. It is to allow both quarantined and isolated students, and we'll talk about the distinction there, to receive educational services while enabling school districts to include those students in AADA. So this allows them to be able to continue to deliver instruction, to have them counted for attendance purposes for state funding, and hopefully continue that instruction, which is so desperately needed if students need to be quarantined. So under our existing attendance regulation, typically you have to be in person to be counted and receive state funding for those students. There are enumerated exceptions in the attendance regulation already, and so this would be another exception from that in-person instruction. If I can refer us to the draft E-Reg on page 3 and section 1(4)(I). So we've got one paragraph that's going to pack a lot in it. Again, this is for school year 21-22, only for that time. If a pupil is quarantined due to documented possible exposure to COVID-19, so we've kind of talked about what that means in terms of our staff, but also for our students, if there's a documented possible exposure, or if they are isolated. So we're seeing this as a new phrase in the student attendance. Isolation does mean that a student has been diagnosed with COVID. So this exception could apply to either quarantine students or isolated students. So let me kind of talk about isolation as this being one path that a district could choose to include these students in their ADA. There's also another existing path that they might choose, and that is if we have a student that qualifies to be coded as home hospital, meaning they have a diagnosis of COVID and there is an expectation that they're going to be out of in-person for more than 5 consecutive school days, they could use the home hospital route. So these two routes have very different requirements. Home hospital requires the convening of your home hospital committee. For our special ed students, of course, you're looking at their ARC, their IEP and convening that ARC if you need to. So none of those rules change. None of those rules change under home hospital. Additionally, but under this path, if you choose to go under this path, you don't have to convene the home hospital committee, but you do have to deliver more instruction. So under home hospital, there are minimum instruction requirements. Under this route, you would not have to convene your home hospital, but there's more instructional requirements. Under this path, you have to deliver at least the minimum amount of daily instruction required under KRS 158.060, which generally is 6 hours. So basically what we're trying to create is this path where you likely would have students that are asymptomatic, they're at home, you want them to receive the full benefit of instruction. They are capable of receiving that instruction, and this would allow them to be counted as an in-person student if they receive that level of instruction. If they don't, then they don't qualify to be included in AADA, and instead are counted as an absence. just like if if a child had the flu. You know, they're out for an experiment of time, they're not receiving instruction, they are an absence, and they are not included in ADA for state funding purposes. So 2 paths for the isolated, 1 path for the quarantine. I guess it is technically 2 paths, because if you're just quarantined, you could either take advantage of this, or you can treat them like a student with the flu as an absence. So if a district can't perform that level of instruction, they would get an absence and not included in the state funding. So let me pause there for just a minute and see if we have questions around the ability of a pupil to be deemed to be in quarantine and how state funding will still flow with instruction provided.
Board members, feel free to just unmute and pose any questions that you may have.
Not a question, but a statement. Thank you for bringing this, because it's going to be much needed. It goes along with the thing with the teachers and students there that have to be quarantined, but districts shouldn't be penalized if they're getting that instruction. So thanks for thinking ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Poe.
Any questions? All right. In that case, I would ask the board to entertain a motion to approve the emergency amendment to 702 KAR 7:125 as presented.
Patrice McCrary, I so move.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Randy Poe, I'll second.
Thank you, Dr. Poe. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? With thanks again to Robin and team. Meredith, would you please call the roll?
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson.
Elvis Johnson, yes.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, yes.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, yes. Thank you all. And now to the companion regulation around pupil attendance. Back to Robin.
Thank you, Chair. This one is very easy. It is identical to the emergency regulation we just looked at, except we have also made 2 minor technical conforming amendments. You'll see the first one on the first page there. You can see where the strike through. And then it is also in section 8.2 where we've renumbered. So those are the only changes. The language from the emergency reg is included. It should be coming up on page 3. There it is right there. And so we have only made 2 minor numbering technical changes to the rest of this regular regulation. It will again take the same path, that longer path for codification.
Excellent. Thank you. Any questions for Robin about this amendment? I would then ask the board to entertain a motion to approve the amendment to 702 KAR 7:125.
Madam Chair, this is Joanne Adams. I so move.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Do we have a second?
This is Holly Bloodworth, I second.
Thank you, Ms. Bloodworth. Board members, any further questions or discussion? Meredith, please call the roll.
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson. Alvis Johnson. Mr. Johnson? Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy
well prepare us for the future. You don't like to have a pandemic that caused you to accelerate some things, but there have been some really positive things in the world of education technology that have been in go for a while that have been accelerated. So we're very proud of those, along with a current infographic that we have in place. We also make you aware of all the technology funding needs. You don't have to prove those. We just make you aware of it. Our CATS master plan, our 2018 to 2024, lays out the details of that funding. It's about $366 million per year. That's a big dollar amount, but in comparison to the other public and private sector industries, typically 4 to 6% of your overall budget goes toward technology. So if you take a look at the $366 million, it's about 4% of all the different funding sources that are available to K-12. So we're in the bottom half of that, but we're in line with it. And the good news is we've identified $356 million from a variety of funding sources to go toward that $366 million. In my close to 30 years with the Department of Education, this is the closest we've ever gotten to the need of having funding to address that need. So I'm appreciative of that, but also one of the reasons we're able to do that is because of the CARES funding, which is temporary funding. I do want to give a shout out for our commissioner. Commissioner Glass. He is, since his time on, he's been, and he's not paying me to say this, I say this in other groups that can confirm it. He has been very supportive and appreciative of our education technology services my entire time, and very enjoyed working with him, but also the entire KD leadership team, because we all had proposals for how to best use the 10% money for services for school districts. And so they had to agree to this as well. So the money that we got will do some really nice things for our school districts over the next 2 or 3 years. There's a couple of these that will position our state for the next 10 to 15 years. The key part that the board has to approve, and the only thing really you have to approve, is the $15.4 million of that 356. But I do want to spend a little time with that. I know you were all talking about it, additional budget requests yesterday and about opportunities, to address something. If within the staff note, it talks about our significant reduction in funding over time. And what and a big part of that service is to provide that. But we haven't had a cost of living increase really since then. And so all these services over time, say there's X percent more money. So we are reaching a point of really big problems if we do not get that reestablished. And it's not a huge amount of money to reestablish that, but it well positions our program to keep on doing great things for kids when this money ends. And so I go through this cycle probably every 8 years when we reach this really critical stage. And the plus side is during my course, 30 years, our board and our legislature and our governor's office has responded in getting that funding that was needed to keep us going forward as we can show on that timeline over the period of time. So I do want, I know you all are discussing that. I wanted to give a strong, plug for that. Is we are at the best we've ever been, but we know that is very short, and it doesn't address, that additional funding doesn't address some of the shortfalls we have now, with lack of a cost of living increase. For example, our financial management system that we've used, and it's very successful in all districts across the state. But there's always a cost of living increase with that every year that comes along with this. So that's, once again, we have a good partner with that, but all these require that, and we've not addressed that. So I want that to stay on the radar screen of all these services, technology related, that folks have become so dependent on. If we don't have something that addresses this at some time, and we're very frugal with our funds, we will start sliding backward very quickly. So I just want to put that on your radar screen. So the main thing you're all approving is the $15.4 million. And a good chunk of that money are the services and the staff that provide these services to school districts. A good part of that chunk is also buying something at the state level as a shared service across the state. You saw Munis, our financial management system, is one of those. And we also provide a KETS offer of assistance, a financial officers districts to districts out of that. And we have other pots of money that we're using that as well. But that's the main item that you all have to approve. But I really wanted to usually this comes before a committee meeting. So I'm really happy that this opportunity is a full board to give it a plug. But this is really time for you all to kind of ask any kind of questions you have. We have, Mike Lettingham, who's been with us for a very, very long time. You probably should get 5 stars for dealing with me all these years. Mike was one of our original folks that deployed the technology in Kentucky, became the first state in the country to have high-speed internet access to all of our school districts back in the 1995. And Mike Lettingham led that effort for us. And he eventually has become one of our division directors in charge of a budget. And of course, Marty Park, our dynamic part, Marty Park is our chief digital officer, is involved with anything digital. So we are basically, as I explained to anyone, like I do my mom, anything that involves technology in any kind of way, if it plugs into the wall, if it's got internet, if the word digital, if it's got data, voice, and video going back and forth, we're involved with it some kind of way and want to be involved with it, make sure it's a good experience. And so I think we, like I say, we're far from perfect, but our track record is pretty good about putting things in place in very large scale that make a good experience for our students and teachers and staff. So I'll pause there for any kind of questions you may have or comments.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Board members, please feel free to unmute. You're getting some love for the glasses in the chat, David, just saying.
I buy direct. Yep.
Board members, you may recall when we first were oriented to the board, we had a chance to hear at length from David about the Kentucky Educational Technology System and have enjoyed our opportunities over the last couple of years learning about the School Technology Leadership Program and all things digital, as David mentioned. And I would be remiss not to say one more time what an outstanding team David has brought together with a lot of longevity at the department, and the fruits of those labors indeed paid out this past year when we were all pivoting to remote learning under a lot of stress, I might add. So
I would also say this, and I feel pretty confident. I do believe that we have the best relationship with districts of any state in the United States. Now, some of that has to do with John Deputy, some of that has to do we've walked the talk, but our success over the past 18 months has just not been the agency. It's been our school district folks working hand with hand, and we've had some outstanding vendor teammates and partners that all understood the spotlight was on. We needed a reliable service as best as we can do it under these conditions, and they came through in a big way. So that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time on the 18 months of being the proudest. But also we got another 12 to 18 months in front of us that has a lot of good work and things that we want to do as well. So, and we have identified those in the master plan as well. But there's a cause for celebration, but also my word of caution about this funding source that has done wonderful things, that we have been incredibly frugal with it. It is reaching a point to where we're going to start tumbling backward if we do something to address it. So it's always reached this point of crisis. I always kind of give these words of warning before it reaches crisis, and we're really fast approaching that without restoring that funding. And if there is a chance in this upcoming legislative session to where there appears to be there's surplus funding, and Robin went over yesterday all the things, I definitely want to give that a strong at bat, because we reestablished it and got that cut back in 2008, and been really trying our best to move along without it. And once again, very appreciative of the CARES funds that we have to do some things beyond that.
You're muted, Doc Young.
And Terry, you're muted on that.
Man, as David mentioned earlier, where there is a master plan for technology, a 6-year master plan under which we are operating now, but specifically today, we're considering approval of the operational plan for school year 2021-22. You see the pared down plan in your portal, along with the infographic that David mentioned earlier. Unless there are further questions.
I see some hands raised. So
Before I call for a motion, Mrs. McCreary and then Dr. Poe.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I believe it was 2004, 2005, I served on the Commissioner's Technology Advisory Committee, and I listened to you build a dream back that far ago, that long ago. Never, ever in my wildest dreams or thoughts did I think that what your dream you had then would lead to our success during a pandemic. So thank you for being a visionary. So I wanted to get that out there for you. He's thought about this for a long time.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Visionary and the glasses. Dr. Poe.
Yes, same thing, David. Been with you from the beginning, so awesome work. The question that I have on this, and I agree with you on the funding, because lots of districts spend millions of dollars out of their general fund to be where we are today too. So even with all that, they're going to be cycling through that in the next 4 years. But my big question to you is that I've been asked by a lot is the issue of cybersecurity in relationship to districts out there and what they should be doing. So can you address that a little bit within the plan of where we are with, what's happening? I know that we had a couple attacks on a few district systems, and that spurred a lot of people to go out and purchase cybersecurity insurance and things like that. Can you kind of update us what districts should be looking at in that, or not looking in that, of either spending hundreds of thousands of dollars or no dollars based on what the state is doing in relationship to the master plan with this?
think there's two things. There was a law passed several years ago about once a year, every board, including to you all, providing kind of cybersecurity health check report. So we are close to finishing that and providing the commissioner so he can provide it to you all to take a look at. It gives you kind of a health check where we're at and details across the state that I think will be helpful to you. I would tell you during the pandemic, we usually get 4 billion attempted attacks on Kentucky K-12 every year. It's constant, and it's been increasing in tremendous magnitude of trying to make these services reliable during a pandemic, obviously, and such a dependence upon the virtual world. I would tell you the things that we've done over the past 30 years, while we're far from 100% perfect, prepared us pretty well and helped prevent a lot of cyber attacks. Us going to product standards, where we have product standards across the state you're familiar with, the same financial management system, school information system, high-speed network. In comparison to other states, it's tough enough to make one of those work and be protected. Our move to cloud-based, we are the national leader, and just not K-12, but in government, I would even say in the private sector, of moving to cloud-based, which also provides an additional level of security because you're working with some partners that can deal with this 24/7 versus just in a school district and organization, just there 8x4. But I would tell you the big part of this. In 2018, I presented to Congress, and I can share you the part of that presentation. And they chose Kentucky as an example to present to them. And mainly, it's we can put a lot of technology things in place, and we need to do that. But our number one best prevention is working on the people side of it, educating them how to be more savvy. Especially in K-12, we want to be helpful. We're more trusting. And so I don't want you to turn into a jaded person or anybody, but a little bit more, cautious about things you see. If it's too good to be true, don't believe it, and just how to become more savvy with it. That's our number one best way, is an increase of folks becoming savvy. And, we have something called, this can happen to you, but don't let it. It's a document we found that we see it happens to other districts around the United States that we share with districts, not to expose their misery, because we pretty much keep it, who that happened, but to also make sure it doesn't happen to them as well. So a big part of prevention is working on the people side versus just the pure technical side, although we have the technical side in place and that works to an extent. But the cyber criminals have found difficulty getting through the technical side. And I don't want to motivate any cyber criminals here, so I'm always kind of a balance of that.
Yeah.
But I do think one of our best defenses is on the people side. And we work continuously with districts. We have, I think, the best cybersecurity officer in K-12 in the United States, Bob Hackworth. I've told him that. We're very fortunate to have him. He's been a former Kentucky teacher. He's played various roles. He was with our Kentucky Virtual High School, one of our field staff, and tremendous perspective. I think he helps us protect our state. And actually, when I went to Washington, D.C., Bob was with me in part of that, helped prepare me for that presentation. So I think that would be helpful to you to send, if you ever present to Congress, you got to read out everything, which I always say, well, why didn't you just let me send it to you? So you got to read it. So I think it'd be helpful for you to read what I sent, because it still applies today as what we're doing with cybersecurity.
Yeah, excellent. Please do. Any other questions for David?
I think I saw one from Sharon.
Oh, Sharon, please.
Hi, David. Thanks so much for this report. And I do want to, I had two issues and cybersecurity was one of them. So I'll move to the next one. We are always concerned about sustainability and using what we know to be one-time funding to help us leverage. And then, so we have to be responsible stewards and know what the cost of sustaining will be. So can you, will be preparing and approving our legislative ask and a budget. So as we go through this process, I'm just going to urge you to stay at the table and know that, our stewardship responsibility will be actualized through wanting to know that those benefits that we achieved through this, the funding, I'm not going to say it's a gift. It's really trying to help us get to the place that we need to be. And with that, how do we sustain it? So you certainly have piqued my interest and support as we go forward into this next, into the fiscal functions of the work that we must do with the department. So thank you so much for your leadership. You've helped us be even prouder of our Kentucky Department of Education.
Yes, ma'am. You know, I'm mainly known as Mrs. Couch's son versus David, where I grew up, because my mom's a beloved teacher. So I always try to take a look at the world through that perspective. And my, daughter's teachers and my sons are teachers. So I get constant feedback on how to make things back, whether I want it or not, at any kind of gathering, and try to stay in touch with making this a good experience for folks. And you're exactly right, is, the long-term part of the big benefit, one of the big benefits of this pandemic, there's a position that we've always had that we wanted to show love for and appreciate. It's our digital learning coaches. And we always knew that digital learning coach can really show folks how to maximize that investment instructionally, administratively within a district. And so what this has brought to light is the importance of digital learning coaches. And I do think we've had, in my time of 30 years, a much higher percent of our teachers that are getting a good run and go on how to maximize this investment in their instruction for our students.
Excellent. All right, team, thank you so much. I would now ask for a motion to approve the Kentucky Educational Technology System Operations Plan for school year 2021-22.
This is Sharon. I so move.
We have a motion from Dr. Robinson. Do we have a second?
This is Joanne Adams. I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. Any further discussion or questions? Many thanks, David and team. Meredith, please call the roll.
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson.
Elvis Johnson, yes.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, yes.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, I vote yes. Thank you again. The next item for our consideration is approval of the Harrison County School District's request to waive 702 KAR 4:180. With us is Division Director Che Ritter to provide an overview of the request. And I believe that I saw that Superintendent Burchett has also joined our call today. Che.
Thank you, Chair Young. I appreciate it. As you'll see in the staff note, this is a request out of Harrison County related to a high school. Since Dr. Burchett is with us, I'd like to have him sort of explain his waiver request, if that's okay, Chair Young.
Certainly. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Burchett.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Young. Thank you, State Board of Education members, for the opportunity to present before you today. I know you've had a very busy and long schedule, so I'll try to be brief. In short, as our community was working on our current district facilities plan, we recognized that the data that was being utilized at the division was the 2016 University of Louisville data as far as projections for our current community population. And it wasn't reflective of really what is occurring here in this community today. We knew that based on what we were seeing here. And so our LPC and our board both voted unanimously to dig into that deeper and present a DFP that actually aligns with what is going on in this community. We did some research locally from PBA's office, planning and zoning, building permits, those things, and found that U of L's data from 2016, and it's not that they were wrong, they were doing projections based on the information they had available to them from 2010. So we're operating on 10-year-old data already, and we learned that some of those projections were very underestimated, especially in relation to new home construction and people moving to the area. Of course, if you're familiar with Harrison County, we are adjacent to Scott County. It's about 20 minutes from here to Toyota. and just north of Bourbon County on US 27, running north and south through the state of Kentucky. And so we were really recognizing that our community is growing, and we verified that with outreach to the University of Louisville, Dr. Ruther, who does the population estimates, and we received new data, and I shared that with Mr. Ritter and Ms. Kinney. And of course, after we saw the new data, it certainly supported what we were doing. And now everyone is in agreement. And we just want to formally request from the state board a waiver of the regulation for our planning purposes.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Burchett. He and I had a chance to talk last week, and I just want to commend him and his team for paying such close attention to the data and realizing that the data weren't actually accurate or reflective of Harrison County's current reality. So I think that works well. You will see in your staff notes that you do have a recommendation for approval. Che, is there anything you'd like to add before we consider a motion?
No, ma'am. It sounds like Dr. Burchett covered everything. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Board members, any questions for Che or for Dr. Burchett?
Chair Young, I would like to add one more thing if I could. On May 27th, our board adopted a nickel facilities tax to support this plan. It was fully enacted on July the 12th after the 45-day window had passed. And I'll tell you, it demonstrates the community support for the plan and that they recognize this is the right move because there was no, and I say zero, opposition in the local community. And I think that's probably fairly unheard of in this day and time.
Bravo. Again, more kudos. That portends really well for your entire community. So thank you for that as well. Unless there are further questions, I would ask the board to entertain a motion to approve the Harrison County School District's request to waive 702 KAR 4:180. Do we have?
This is Randy Poe. I make the recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Poe. We have a motion. We have a second.
This is Jamie Bowling.
I second.
I think she beat you, Jamie. So a second from Mrs. McCrary. Any further discussion?
Chair Young?
Yes.
This is Robin Kinney. I hate to interrupt.
No.
If I could ask, I think we need both the waiver approved and also the approval of the DFP itself.
Oh, okay. So Todd, is that can that occur as a second motion today, even though the agenda doesn't specifically stipulate?
Yes, since this is a regular meeting, you can take action on the matter. So if the member who made the motion wants to amend their motion, and then we'll have another second on it, or you can do it by two separate motions and votes.
This is Randy. I will make the amendment to my original motion based on Dr. Kenny's statement.
Excellent. So the motion as it has been amended is to approve the waiver request and the district facility plan for Harrison County Schools. Do we have a second?
And I will second that.
And a second from Mrs. McCrary. Thank you so much for the clarification, Robin and Todd. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Meredith, please call the roll.
Joanne Adams, excuse me, Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson.
Alvis Johnson, yes.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, yes.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, I vote yes. All right, thank you again, Harry. Thanks, Che. We appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, board members. And I do want to say, Mr. Ritter and Ms. Kinney were very instrumental in helping us work through this situation. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Dr.
so
Burchett.
much.
Thank you.
All right, board members, the next item for our consideration, a set of review items, the first of which is an update on our Commissioner's Strategic Dashboard from KDE Chief Performance Officer Karen Dodd.
Good afternoon. All right, let me pull up the dashboard here. and I will walk through this with you. All right, Chair, are you seeing that?
We are, thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so this is, as you know, one of Commissioner Glass's goals for the year is to put in place this dashboard for the purpose of transparency. So what we have for you today is still under development. I did share the link with Meredith. I don't know if you all received that, but you're welcome to look at it. It is not complete. I know already as I've been preparing that there are some errors on there. So please know that it is in development still, and we're very open to your feedback. Anything that you may want changed as well, we can do that before this ever goes live. So what you're looking at right now is the home page, and this is going to show kind of the story of each one of these measures. That's the intention there. Then you can get to more details about any of these by clicking on more, or at the top, you'll see that there are tabs across the top for each one of the measures, just to make it easy. On the left-hand side in the blue are all the academic measures, and on the right in the yellow are all the non-academic measures. And at the very bottom, you'll see that we have a few that say coming soon. So these are things that we haven't typically measured, and we're still working on figuring out exactly how we're going to do that. So once we get the dashboard up and running, we'll turn our focus back to those that we don't have measurements for currently. And please feel free to stop me anytime. I'm going to go on to the NAEP tab. All right. So on here, you can see that we are currently ranked. We look at 4th grade reading. So you can change by grade and subject, or you can even change by year, however you want to look at this. We did denote Kentucky, you'll always see in blue, our surrounding states in green, and then all of the other states in gray. So for each one of these grades and content areas, we have a separate page. As you click on it, it'll change the goal. So right now I'm showing 4th grade reading. We are currently 22nd. And so we set a goal on this one to move to 20th over 5 years. And I know that doesn't seem very ambitious, but what I want to show you is if we scroll down, you see the trend that we have here. And we had a good year between 13 and 15, because remember, this is one that is measured every other year. But other than that, we've really been trending in the wrong direction. So we need to get this under control. We need to start moving things in the right direction. So we really do feel like 2 points is going to be an aggressive goal to get this turned around in 5 years, which would be 3 administrations of the NAEP. Okay, I'll move on to the proficiency gap, and this is looking at the K-Prep data. And here we look again at 3rd grade math, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math, and 8th grade reading. And with this one, we're looking at the difference between students of color and white students, and how many of them, what percentage of them are actually achieving proficiency. So you can see the actual percentage, for instance, 3rd grade math, 35.2 students of color are proficient compared to 51.5 of white students. So the gap being 16.3% between the two groups, and you can see that across. If you go down, you can see from 2016 to 2019, those numbers have been fairly flat. So we haven't been closing the achievement gap. They've stayed fairly the same. You see a little bit of movement in the right direction between 16 and 17 for 8th grade math, but it goes back up again. So again, we really need to turn this one around, because we are changing assessments, as you know. So the Kentucky summative assessment comes out this spring, and we'll have to re-baseline. So I didn't want to put nothing out here. So this is the current data that we have, but it will go away because from what I understand, there won't be a way to compare K-Prep to the Kentucky Summative Assessment. So we will be rebaselining when that data comes out again. Moving on to advanced placement. Advanced placement and dual credit are going to be very similar. What you're going to see here are 3 different categories. We look at course enrollment, course completion, and obtained qualifying score. We talked about all of this as we were looking at these measures a while back. So I hope you like the way we're showing this one because we changed this one so many times trying to get just the right look for everyone. So what we did, again, we have white students and then students of color. So of those enrolled, we have 79.5% of those students who are enrolled are white students as compared to the 20.5%, which are students of color. Interesting, what I find interesting here is when you look at course completion, white students go from 79.5 to 76.4 of those who completed, whereas students of color go from 25.5 to 19.5. So only 1 point is lost for our students of color, which I find to be very encouraging. But then when you look at AP, as you know, that's actually an assessment that needs to be taken. And this is where we really kind of lose students here. So only 30% of those those who were enrolled ended up getting a qualifying score if they were white, and the students of colors, it's almost 7%. So we've got a lot of students, 62.3, who do not get a qualifying score. That being said, we really feel that the experience of getting into the AP classes is really what we need to focus on. They're getting that exposure to those higher level classes. And so we wanted to set our goal around enrollment. And because this is an equity measure for us, we thought that it was appropriate to look at the population of colored students in Kentucky, which is 24.7. So that number there is wrong. It should say 20.5% of students of color are currently enrolled. So we want to move from 20.5 to 24.7. So in other words, whatever the population is, it should reflect in the number of, or the percentage of students who are enrolled in AP. Again, you can see it's been fairly flat, but it does uptick a little bit, both in enrollment, completion, and qualifying scores for students of color.
Karen, before we leave this slide, as I look at this, I do like the looks of it. I think it's very helpful. What I'm missing that I think is a really important piece of information on this slide is what percentage of students of color are there at the high schools? In other words, this 20.5% is what portion of all students of color at the high school level. I think it, but perhaps I can find that in another place in the dashboard.
Okay, so you're saying instead of the entire population, which is 24.7, just looking at the population of high school students of color?
So maybe I'm misunderstanding. When I see the goal, what I think I read there is that of all of the students of color in Kentucky, 20.5% of them are enrolled in advanced placement classes now? No, it's saying that, oh, you know what? So, okay, I see where there may be a disconnect here. Yeah, so of the students who are enrolled, 20.5% are students of color. Okay.
So we're not saying that every student of color needs to be taking an advanced ed classes, which would be, you know, if we said 24.7% of blacks, not just black, but any student of color should be taking it, that would be the entire population. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying of those that are taking it, we think that that should reflect the population in Kentucky overall.
Okay.
But what I'm hearing you say is that we should look more specifically at the population of students of color in high school, which might be different than all of Kentucky.
Right. And what I want to know is that more students of all of the students who attend high school, that more students of color enroll in AP classes every year. And perhaps that's a little bit different from they make up a larger percentage of the students, the subset of students who take AP. I don't know, maybe we could try both sets. Let me just think about it. We don't have to make any decisions about that today.
Okay. All right. I took a note though.
Thank you.
Yep. Then we're going to look at dual credit, and this is very similar. We set this page up the same way to look at those who are enrolled, those who have completed, and those who have qualifying scores. The good news here is that qualifying scores in all categories are higher, so only 14.6% of students who enter dual credit do not receive a qualifying score. So we found that to be encouraging. As you know, as long as they complete and get a C or higher, they get that qualifying score. So we set the goal the same way here, taking those 15.4% of students who are currently enrolled and moving that to the state population of students of color being 24.7%. But I'm going to keep that same thing in mind that you were saying for AP, Chair Young, and we'll look at that for dual credit as well.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And here you'll see when we look at the trend, we do have more of an uptick. And here again, we are just looking at students of color in these trend lines, but it is going up even a little bit more steeply than we did for AP. So it looks like more kids are starting to take dual credit. Okay. Moving on to ACT. Here we look at other states who are similar to Kentucky when it comes to taking the ACT. So what you're seeing are 17 states, including Kentucky, that test 95% or better of their students. So Kentucky, we test 100% of our kiddos. So we wanted to look at other states who are doing at least 95% of testing with their kiddos. And so when we look at it that way, we are currently ranked 9th out of those 17. And so we wanted to go up 1 rank per year, which would put us at 4. And as you can see from our trend, we think it's very doable. We did have quite a jump from 15 to 16, and again from 16 to 17 and to 18 even. We did have a bad year in 2019, but we do feel like we can get that turned around, and that we should really strive to do better there. So we're excited about that rather ambitious goal. Okay. Graduation, we are comparing ourselves to all 50 states, of course, and we are currently 4th. If you look at our ranking over time, we hit an all-time high of 3rd in 2018. So we feel like we should be shooting for number 1 when it comes to graduation.
Absolutely.
All right. Moving on to educator engagement. This is one we talked a lot about with all of you, and we decided to go ahead and look at Impact Kentucky survey data. So we've pulled out 3 of the domains: school climate, school leadership, and staff leadership relationships. And in order to come up with an index, what we did was combine the 3 of those and came up with an average. So you can see each of them separately here. They all have, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 15 questions that are asked as part of that survey. And so by putting those together, and they are all very strongly correlated. That was something that we looked at, did some factor analysis on that. So these are all very strongly coordinated. And so we felt like using an index of these 3 domains would be a good way to go to gauge educator engagement. So currently that's at 68%. This was the first one, so of course there's no trend data here yet, and we'll have to wait. We said that a goal would be coming in 2022. That's when we would have the second scores coming in. May even want to wait until 2024 until we actually have the trend line before we set that goal, but want to share with you what we have so far. Then we looked at teacher characteristics. And for teacher characteristics, we are looking at two things: the teacher inexperience, so how many teachers have 0 to 3 years of classroom experience, and then also teachers of color. With the first one, with inexperience, we broke that out between Title I and non-Title I eligible. And as you can see, for Title I, 19.2% of teachers are inexperienced, and it's 15.5 in those non-Title I schools. Then looking at students of color, it's pretty, we didn't break this one out. It was very similar, so we didn't really see a point. It might have been off by 0.1 or 0.2. There wasn't much difference. So we just wanted to look at that trend over time. It's been very consistent from 4.8, 4.8, 4.9. So again, I have not talked to Dr. Woods Tucker about this one. I think that we need to have a conversation, but this again is around equity. So our thinking is that we need to put a goal in place to increase the number of teachers of color in all of our schools. So it doesn't matter if they're Title I eligible or not. The number is so low, we really need to focus on that in all schools. Okay. Moving on to financial equity. I think this is our last one. Yes, it is. This one we struggled a lot with. We initially looked at our SEEK data, and we broke that out between Title I versus or compared to non-Title I schools. And what we saw was that Title I schools were receiving more funding than the non-Title I schools, which is what we would expect. So SEEK is doing what SEEK is meant to do. And I said in our leadership meeting, it wasn't very interesting data, not to offend anyone, but there wasn't a so what there. Like, what do you do with that? How do you set a goal around that? So we went back into Impact Kentucky and looked at the data there. And there is a domain for access to resources, which we thought maybe was a little bit more interesting, a little bit more compelling, and something that schools and districts could actually do something with. So that's just what this one is. It's just looking at that one domain, access to resources. And as you can see in Title I schools, 46% of certified staff felt positive when they were answering those questions, so that they answered affirmatively to those questions, as opposed to the 51% in non-Title I schools. So it's really rather low in both, but there's something there. They can go in and actually look at all of the questions that are in there to see, where they were scoring low, what teachers feel that they need that they're not getting when it comes to resources in their schools. So we're definitely open to any thoughts on this or any of these indicators, if you have any comments. I see the comment from Mrs. McCrary about, are all schools required to offer AP? And as Amanda said, the answer is no there. And that is part of the discussion that we've been having. There is inequity just in the fact of which, some schools are able to offer AP and dual credit. The same is true with dual credit. And with dual credit, we're discussing about the gatekeepers for getting into dual credit. That can also be different by the school that they're trying to get into, the college that they're trying to take that dual credit through. And that could be a challenge for any kid. My daughter recently was challenged with that, and she's an 8th student. So it's interesting.
And before we open for questions, Jason, anything you would like to add about where we are with the strategic dashboard? Is it growing up, shaping up as you had imagined?
I think so, and it's based on the goal that the board set out for me in establishing this dashboard. And of course, we've brought these indicators to you a few times to get your feedback on them, but now you can start to see it really taking shape and start to be populated with some data. So appreciation to Karen and to KY Stats for the work that they've done and putting a template together for us to take a look at. And I think what we're seeking now is what input do you have on sort of as we continue to develop and sharpen this, very much a draft version that's a first shot at this dashboard that you're seeing now, but what changes would you like to see to it going forward? And I guess one more thing that I would add is that we're going to have some disruption in the data now too, because we had NAEP disruption, K-Prep disruption, some of the other measures that are connected to this. We don't have historical data on, or it was collected in a time during COVID. We don't know what sort of disruption we're looking at going forward. So I think we've got to put in asterisks or some kind of note in this to say that happened. And so we look at data from 16, 17, 18 versus what was collected in the last 2 years, and then recovery from that. That's a significant effect that we're going to have to think about how to handle.
Board members, any questions or comments or feedback? I think I heard a hand. Is that possible? All right.
Chair Young, I do have a question about that.
Yes, please.
When on the data about AP classes, I saw Claire had, or Trish, Patrice had asked if all schools were required to have AP, and the answer to that was no. What percentage of our schools do offer the AP classes? Is there data on that?
I think
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Amanda does or not.
Advanced Kentucky may track that.
Actually, it's in our school report card. I don't know what that is right off, but that is reported on AP courses that are offered, as well as dual credit, Cambridge, and IB, International Baccalaureate. I don't know what the number is, Joanne. I know that our awesome data people at KDE will be able to tell you that, but it is in the school report card under the Kentucky tab piece. You can see the advanced coursework.
Okay, thank you.
For you all.
Chair Young.
Yes, please, Patrice.
I'm wondering, AP courses, are they financially covered under gifted and talented funds, or do just regular school funds have to be used during that time? How is that funding? Does it differ from regular courses?
So a high school, if they were to receive an allocation of gifted and talented funds, could use that for teaching advanced placement courses. But the gifted and talented funds, quite frankly, are so low that when a school district receives them, they almost always choose to use them at the elementary, sometimes middle school level. So when high schools do offer advanced placement and dual credit, they do have to tap into other resources and make those decisions accordingly. And there's a lot of conversation now too about helping students understand when dual credit is more advantageous to them than advanced placement, and when advanced placement is more advantageous to them than dual credit. So as we find that those spaces grow, then schools and individual students have to make some decisions among what those options are. So a lot of the work I do personally at UK is to expand access to dual credit so that the gatekeeping that Karen described is minimized over time so that kids, essentially all juniors and seniors, should be able to access dual credit under the right conditions. So
I guess I'm struggling with the thought that how are we going to increase numbers of students if we're not offering it? That's where I'm struggling.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't believe there's been a decline in the offering. And I know that some districts are having some very creative conversations around how to share advanced placement teachers across county lines using virtual options, for example. A lot of that virtual sharing happens through dual credit as well. So the general sense that I have, I don't know if these numbers are showing up right now, but the general sense that I have is that that access and opportunity, in fact, are on the rise. And of course, when we talk about these kinds of dashboards, incentivizing districts to ensure that students have early college opportunities as ubiquitously as possible is one of our stated goals. And then Meredith reminds me, of course, that we do have additional budget request items on the table related to some of this work as well. Other questions, especially any actionable feedback you'd like Karen to take back to her team? All right, Karen, thank you so much. It's looking great.
Thank you.
Keep growing. Thank you again. The next review item for our consideration is the 2022-24 biennial budget update with defined calculations, and then moving into a conversation about our ABR projects. So I'm going to turn it back over to the star of the day, Robin Kinney. And Karen Worth is also with her again today.
Thank you, Chair Young. I'm actually going to let Karen shine in the next presentation. We are continuing to listen to all your conversations. And so after we concluded our ABR discussion yesterday, Karen and I spent some time just thinking about what you had already talked about in the discussion yesterday. And then we also were very curious about how the things you had talked about aligned with the presentation we heard on your goals yesterday. So we spent a little bit of time trying to match up your goals to certain ABRs. I've asked Karen this afternoon to start. She's going to talk about defined calculations first, and we kind of need to get that out of the way so you at least have an awareness of what that is. We don't have a lot of discretion over defined calculations, so we'll let her talk about that first. And then I asked her to kind of hit on the ones that you didn't hit on yesterday, things that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about. Of course, Associate Commissioner David Couch kind of helped us out with the KETS item. So much appreciation to David for stepping in on that. But there were a few others that you didn't get to yesterday that we just want to make sure that we highlight just a little bit. So Karen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can start us with defined calculations.
Thank you, Robin. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us back today. Today we're going to talk about defined calculations, and this is kind of the third piece of our budget request process. You know, we've talked to you guys about the baseline budget, which are the funds that we currently receive. We're in conversation about additional budget requests. And then this third piece called defined calculation. These are costs that are not controlled by the Department of Education. So these are services that are provided by other agencies, and those agencies that administer the services, they determine the cost. So these are really costs that are out of our control. Next slide, please. Defined calculations, the assumptions and the costs that accompany those are approved by the Office of the State Budget Director and the Legislative Research Commission. We do have instructions in the budget instructions that tell us how to portray those defined calculations in our request. So we have certain sets of forms that we complete in KBUD, which is our Kentucky budgeting system, and we have a specific set of forms for the defined calculations. Next slide. This is just a list of some of the categories that we have defined calculations in. As you can see, we have here some health insurance, workers' compensation, our rent and utilities is a defined calculation. We don't control what those dollar amounts are. Motor pool, when we get a car from Fleet, that's considered a defined calculation. Next slide. And then I just listed a few here from fiscal year 21. This was what was budgeted and spent on some of these. Again, our rent, utilities, and insurance here at the Sauer building, we pay approximately $2.6 million a year for those costs. We also utilize Chris and EMARS, so the HR side of the house and the finance side of the house. We have users within the department that use those two mechanisms to complete our processes. So we pay a certain fee based on the number of users that we have. Workers' comp, we all know what that is. Workers' comp is required for our workforce. And then lastly, we do enter into contractual obligations with the APA's office, and they do conduct annual audits for us. So now we're going to stop and we're going to move very, very briefly about defined calculations. Basically, the things that are not under our control. We do not determine the dollar amounts to go with them. So let's move on now back to our ABR conversation. And like Robin said, she and I listened to your discussion yesterday about your goals. And then we tried to match those goals with the ABRs that were discussed. And those goals are great. That's a great guidance for you guys to use as you begin this conversation as to your priorities and where they align with your goals. We also wanted to talk about the ones that we did not mention yesterday, which I'll go through those line by line. And then also anything that's not on this list. We want to make sure that we have a complete representation of our board's priorities. So if there's things that are not on this list, we can definitely talk about getting those added so that my group can begin costing those and getting some good detailed information for you. So let's start talking about the ones we didn't mention yesterday. So the first one that I've got on my list is I know that one of our goals is around a new accountability system. But there's also a couple of requests on our list that's from our Office of Assessment and Accountability that are outside of that process. So wanted to bring attention to those. Not a big dollar amount, but are a couple of things, just the testing security. What I just heard from Associate Commissioner Couch, additional security around online testing is one of the requests from OAA. Turnaround schools. This is the work that Dr. Kelly Foster's group does. Her ER staff is continuously out there plugging away, helping our TSI and CSI schools. That particular initiative that we have here at the department that has proved to be so successful is a request for general fund dollars to support that. On further down our list, I think we talked about those would be CATs. And just to, just to agree with what David has said, this is a request to not only restore CATs, but to keep us on the right track. And this last year and a half has showed us how important the ability to connect virtually is, and we certainly don't want to go backward. So CATs is one of our requests on the list as well that we hadn't gotten a chance to talk about yet. We also have what's called the preschool regional training centers. While we have talked about preschool and we've talked about universal preschool, this is a different request from our Office of Special Education and Early Learning. Our regional training centers, they offer supports to school districts for eligible preschool students, and there are no general funds to support that work. So that request would be for general fund dollars for that initiative. We then talked a little bit about how we wanted to talk through SEEK with you all. So Robin and I thought we'll just we'll group it together. We have 3 lines on here that specifically SEEK. We have SEEK Base, we have SEEK Transportation, and then we have the Vocational Ed Transportation that also falls under the SEEK appropriation. So a little bit different thought process around that, because some of these individual things that we've asked that we have on this list, let's just say professional development. If you were to increase your SEEK base, then school districts would then have the discretion to use those additional funds in areas that they may have holes. So if they're using local dollars or district general fund dollars to support PD, but their SEEK base goes up, that gives them the opportunity to use those dollars in the areas that the local the district needs. So that's kind of the methodology and the thought process behind increasing SEEK base. Transportation, of course, has always been underfunded. I believe we might be at 59%, and then the same for vocational transportation. So just wanted to kind of group those together for you as well, that fall under the SEEK appropriation. And then one that's not on here, but I've been hearing a lot of conversation around AP. So I wanted to kind of share with you information that I know from the financial side about the support that the department has for AP. So we receive $1 million in the BOSS appropriation to support AP exam fees for free and reduced lunch students. So basically, we pay a reduced amount. I believe the AP exam fee is $86, and for free and reduced lunch students, we pay $53. So we receive a bill from College Board, who administers those AP tests, and we pay on behalf of all the school districts for those free and reduced lunch students. So that's the process now. House Bill 192 also appropriated an additional $2.6 million for AP exam fees. And the language in the budget bill around those simply says, first come, first serve. So this fiscal year, we do have the opportunity for additional funding, and we are having conversations with the Office of Teaching and Learning, who are the programmatic folks behind AP, on ways that we can make sure that we get the most bang for our buck from that additional $2.6 million that we did receive for this fiscal year. So I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit and let you all know, how we were providing that, how we provide that support at this time. Also separate from that, we do have a line item amount of $1.7 million that funds Advance Kentucky. And, their work is specifically with, I believe, schools can apply to be part of the program. And we've always heard really good positive things about Advance Kentucky. So I'm going to stop there. What we'd really, really like to get out of our conversation today is just, we don't need you to say this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3 today. But maybe just your thought process based on your goals that you discussed yesterday, so that we can start, putting these in some type of a grouping or something that will help you all as you navigate forward. Of course, nothing specific until October, but we'll be glad to fill in the blanks now if there's any additional questions, or if there's anything that you want to add to the list, or any additional information you want on any of these items. So I'll stop now and take any questions or any conversation.
Board members, feel free to just unmute and jump into the fray. Well, I'm happy to add another ringing endorsement for the $140 million in each of the 2 fiscal years in support of full-day kindergarten. I am anxious to see this coming school year, the impact that has, as well as the long-range impact it will have on those students to have that additional time and resources.
Absolutely. I think that was a big win for us.
Agreed.
Chair Young, I would just like to comment that I really liked the comments about getting the most bang for your buck. And when I look on that last page, most of the items on there that are about SEEK and the full day kindergarten, those are funds that our districts are having to provide anyway. And if we can get more money for that, I think it will help everyone overall. And also, it does help some of our more rural and poorer districts with that, the SEEK transportation and the vocational transportation, because most of the districts with fewer funds to begin with are having to bus those children to those to the other facilities because they don't have those in their county. Right. So I think all of those are very worthy, and everything is very worthy on here. It's just, we wish we had a magic wand for all of it. But I do, it seems just wildly irresponsible to me that we have to ask for additional budget requests for these things. Those should be, I would hope they would at some time become automatic for our districts. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that analysis, Ms. Adams. I agree. Thank you. I would add, as I mentioned yesterday, on that same page, that same slide, we definitely want to make sure that we make a strong request for support for the equity initiative work that has been so central to the work of this board since our beginning.
You know, Chair Young, if I may, as you start looking at this, it is somewhat overwhelming. You know, when we look at the list and we see these item by item by item, and you know, they are all very valid needs on behalf of our school districts, our state operated schools, and the department operations. I am wondering, you know, we've done these very line by line by line. Would it be beneficial if we tried to group some of these together, maybe under themes? And I suggest that under, you know, as I listen to the board talk, I listen to certain things that are to support our teachers, meaning that could be like the K-TIP and professional development. And so I hear some themes kind of bubbling from as we could group some of these into categories, still delineating under each item the individual components. But then we wouldn't have, maybe it wouldn't look so overwhelming. So I'm trying to think of a different way that we could display this that might help you all as you have to come back in October and kind of rank them 1 through 5 for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just offer that as a suggestion. I don't know if that would make it better or worse.
No, I think that visualization is really helpful. And knowing, however, that there will be some Venn diagram kinds of things happening if
sure.
I workforce diversification. I think about that in terms of the teacher pipeline, but I also think about that in terms of equity. But yeah, I'd be happy to generate some of those big buckets based on our conversation yesterday around professional learning and development, equity. Early childhood education.
Yeah, that's kind of the direction Karen and I were playing with last night as we looked at your goals and thinking some of these really fall into buckets under each of those goals, and it didn't seem as intimidating when we were trying to really look through them. So we'd be happy to try to format it a little differently and send it out to the board in advance, way advance, so that you all can take a look at it, maybe look at it a little differently.
And I don't think we brought this up yesterday, but too, always a reminder that we are the Board of Education for the Kentucky School for the Blind, the Kentucky School for the Deaf, and the area technology centers. So I do feel a high level of direct responsibility to ensure that those specialized schools that we operate are well funded. And we've seen over time, specifically as it relates to KSB and KSD, that they were a bit neglected in terms of funding. So on a personal note, I would just remind us all that those are our schools to operate, and we want to do that well.
Absolutely, I agree. And you know, we did receive the additional $1.5 million in House Bill 192, which will go into our base. So that's a big help. Also, are working with the Office of State Budget Director to try to include step and rank for those 2 schools, as well as our ATCs. Make that part of our defined calculations where we're not always behind. Those step and rank increases happen every year. And also the Jefferson County increment affects KSB and KSD. So we are working with John Hicks's group on trying to get those included into our base. So we'll keep you posted on that. But that could be an ABR as well. But we've definitely got it on our list.
Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Robinson.
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that, because we know, given that responsibility, what is needed it's going to get paid, and it's going to get paid at the expense of something else that's needed someplace else. So we've got to get the funding for those agencies really baked in at real cost, and with all factors taken into consideration. And I do like the notion of categorizing some of these so that we can expand folks' understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. For example, if the equity initiative stands out there all by itself and not perhaps with gifted and talented, folks get a perception of what that might be about that is only a third of the story. Mm-hmm. So we've got to communicate this in a way that tells all the story and so that the full impact of what we're trying to accomplish is more accessible and explicit, and in doing so, perhaps court the advocacy of folks who might not understand the full story.
Yes, very, very helpful. I'm reminded when I teach my course in school finance that one of the maxims of the work is that our budgets reflect our values, and we want to make sure that as we're having these conversations that we are making every effort to illustrate the story that Sharon was describing. I also really appreciate, as I marinate a bit on Joanne's comments, there's no fluff. There are no pet projects on this list. These are critically important financial considerations that will serve kids, and that's really important. We will be making difficult decisions among really important funding priorities for us. So that further illustrates the story, I think.
And I don't want the dollar amounts to be, they seem so large, but in comparison to the SEEK appropriation, they're really not. So, don't be daunted by those big three, 300 million and all of that. Don't be, because that's, in comparison to what the appropriation amount is, it's not a huge amount by comparison. So I know it's hard to do, but.
This is a bit of a granular concept, but Karen, as far as back as I can remember, 150 million plus requests for fully funding transportation has been on this list.
Yes.
And yet, it's my perception anyway, I haven't looked up the data, but it's my perception that that's declined somewhere from around 66% to the low 50s over time. So despite the fact that it's been on the list, transportation support for school districts has eroded fairly dramatically over time.
Yes, absolutely. There are several of these on this list that have been historically on our list for additional budget that we have continuously said this is a need that is not being met. So this, I can say the same for KETS, the same for our turnaround schools. It's and you feel like, are we just being a broken record and continue to ask? But we're showing the need and we're showing the importance of those areas.
Well, and unfortunately, even if we get the same amount of money with inflationary factors and increase in cost, we're really going backwards. I mean, even further. It's not that we're not even really holding our own at this point. Right. We're slipping backwards. And what happens is expenditures still have to happen. I mean, it's not like, districts manage and cut and do that, but expenditures still have to happen especially for needs like transportation. So someone has to pay for that. We still have to transport our students. So someone has to pay for that. So it's falling back on the local level.
And again, goes back to the conversation around the SEEK base. If that SEEK base amount goes up, then that would allow districts to be able to apply those additional funds to other areas. And one of those could be their transportation that they're having to supplement.
And that, frankly, is true of full day kindergarten as well. I see hands from Claire and then Holly, please.
This is Claire. I actually lowered my hand, but I'll go on and say something anyway. Sometimes in conversation with legislators that I've had in the past, it strikes me that many times, one of the things as educators we don't do is sell ourselves to the business community and the public as well as we need to. And I think we had a little bit of that conversation yesterday. But particularly when I think about some of the asks in terms of early childhood education and preschool, and the look at the needs of employers, that, you know, I sometimes think we miss the opportunity to talk to the Chamber of Commerce around the state and some of those business leaders and really address those needs with them. And I think that's maybe where we need to be more strategic as a board and really try to use those connections a little more effectively. Because, you know, we know the legislator is always talking about the restriction on funding, but, you know, we have to have pressure applied from other sources other than just KDE. That's all.
Absolutely. Great advocacy point, Claire. And Holly.
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment Robin and Karen on being able to take our conversations and synthesize those and then translate it to some dollars. I think that's a really amazing skill you all have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a superpower. Okay, Robin, in terms of process, we will do some work, some further synthesis and massaging of this information to share back. Maybe Chuck is weighing in on some process questions here too. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, right. The entire discussion has broad and deep implications for our equity agenda as well. If we are not closely attuned to the impact of the decisions that we make around funding, then we can come dangerously close to exacerbating the inequities that already exist. So again, powerfully important conversation. So process-wise, we'll look at some visualization around categories and overlap, and then with some work time that we will have with the board, bring that back, and then with the goal of clarity for you and Karen and the team around our ABRs by the October meeting, right?
Right. And let me also invite, if any of the board members, you know, as soon as we leave today, if you all think of something in the next, you know, however long before we get the next round of information back to you, if you have a question about anything that we've already provided, or if you think of something that we've left off, because most importantly, we want to make sure that we have everything on the list that needs on the list. Remember, not only for advocacy, but also for that historical record so that we can show it is a need. We want to make sure that we don't include anything that doesn't want to be included. But I think as we worked through yesterday's discussion and today's discussion, I think everything that has been presented has kind of gleaned a need in someone's mind on this board. So we think we're kind of heading in the right direction on what we already have on there. We just don't want to leave anything off. And then between now and then, we'll get you another version to look at. We will continue to refine our costs because remember, we're not quite costed out.
Right.
We will continue to add categories so that you can see if we have the opportunity to utilize ESSER funds for some of this. We will denote that. So we would not be utilizing or requesting in all of the categories in all the lines. We may be able to use some ESSER funds for some of this. So we'll kind of whittle that down to what is left, and we do need to ask for an ABR request. And then by the time we come back in October, we will be asking those kind of hard questions of you as a board to try to give us the top 3 to 5 of all the things that you've looked at. So, and then we will categorize with the commissioner's help sort of the remaining items the rest of the way down.
Excellent. I haven't had a chance to talk to Dr. Glass and Dr. Brewer about this yet, but I think it's very likely that we will want to call a special called meeting in September to pick up those retreat items that we delayed yesterday. And that might be a good time for us, Robin, working around your schedule and Karen's when we might be able to get another closer look at the fully costed items and maybe make some further, get closer to our decision at that point.
That would be great. We would welcome that opportunity.
And I'm sorry, I should have asked this yesterday. I did receive a letter supporting the full funding of the National Board Certified Salary Supplement. I just want to clarify as I think about that item. As I read it here, it looks like this past year we were able to fund $1,208 of the $2,000. So districts would have picked up that additional $800 in the reimbursement. Do the 1.8 and 1.9 million represent the difference between the 1,208 and the 2,000, or the total full funding for the supplement?
That would be on top of the appropriation we receive now to then be able to support it 100%.
To close that gap. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just wanted to clarify that number.
Yeah.
All right. Whew. Lot to think about.
Thank you so much for the good discussion today.
Thank you all. Rockstar team, thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, our next review item, also featuring Robin Kinney, along with Lynn McGowan McNear, the KDE employment report.
So I'll every 6 months, we provide to the board a report of our minority hiring efforts and achievements. And we have provided that to you. We break it down, slice it and dice it lots of different ways. We look at Frankfort-based staff. We look at KSB, KSD, and our career and technical education areas as well, our 51 area technology schools. So this is provided really just as a report for your information on where we are at a point in time. Lynn McGowan McNear is our Director of Resource Management, and so personnel and hiring falls under her area. And if you have any questions, Lynn and I will be happy to answer those. And I want to make sure that Lynn is on the call with us. Lynn, are you on the call?
I am on the call, Robin.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hi, Lynn. Thank you.
So we're happy to answer any questions. This is something that we provide every 6 months. We track it on a monthly basis, but we provide it to the board every 6 months.
And just a quick note about that, Lynn, you may recall, but it seems to me when Kevin was here that we actually got these reports monthly. Am I just misremembering that?
You are, well, what I remember since my term has been here, we would present at the board, every board meeting. However, that was changed in the last administration, for every 6 months.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I didn't mean monthly. I meant at every other month at our board meeting. Okay, thank you. Just trying to reconcile that recollection. So, and one other comment. I think this is probably a LUTEC problem. I'm embarrassed to say it out loud, but I do sometimes have trouble opening these notes especially if they are in spreadsheet format. So, does anybody else have trouble, or is it a Lou thing? Okay. Probably shouldn't have spoken out loud. Holly, thank you for raising your hand.
It's not a Lou thing. I had trouble too, Lou.
Oh. Right, exactly.
Oh, and Randy let me know.
Is it, if I may ask, is it just the employment reports, or is it all? Is it just the employment reports?
I couldn't open the ABR spreadsheet, but when I opened my folder yesterday at the meeting, there was a hard copy. So somebody had provided that to me, Robin.
Okay.
It seems to me to be spreadsheets.
Okay.
And it asks for apps, and I try different workarounds from Microsoft to different things. But I think it's really just a configuration in the device.
Okay. Maybe we can get some help from David. Maybe he can help us with that.
David Couch.
David Couch to the rescue.
Change the ink in my printer.
I think it's the KSBA portal this time. I had more trouble getting anything opened, and I never had time or trouble any other time. But this time I had trouble on almost every thing. Yesterday I could only get hard copies. Today I was able to get in, but I had to backdoor in, through multiple attempts at it.
All right, so
I'll reach out to KSBA and make sure that we can check on that issue, and then I'm happy to emailed to the members the spreadsheets that Robin had uploaded in there with Lynn.
Oh, that would be great to get Lynn's information. That would be perfect. And Lynn, we might give you a minute after we take some questions to just highlight anything that you would like to. Holly, followed by Claire. Holly made a face.
Forgot to put my hand down while ago. I apologize.
No worries. Claire.
Ditto. Sorry.
You guys are just testing to see whether I'm watching the hands. Okay, Lynn, anything that you would like to summarize or highlight for us?
No, not at this time. I just want to say, these are a few months behind, and I'm hoping that within the next 6 months, you can see that we are increasing our minority account. I know we've had several new hires, so hopefully that will be reflected at the December meeting.
Excellent, thank you. So I wondered the same when I read the staff note. And I remember that we used to talk about this kind of point of comparison to other state government agencies. And I guess the notion is that we're on par with the other state agencies. This may be one of those that, as we think about our overall comprehensive equity agenda, one of those that we may want to address as well.
Hey, Lynn, could you talk just a little bit about the overall state minority hiring goal and how we compare to that goal for both our Frankfort-based staff and employment as a whole?
Okay, just to give you all a brief summary, in state government, the goal is 12.2%. For each agency. And if you look at our staff notes for for April, we are at 13.9%. So we are doing above what the state requires. But, I think we can always do better. When you get down to the Frankfort based, you look over here and you see how many minority males and females. I think we can always increase that number. And I do think those numbers will increase with the next report if we don't lose any of those current employees. That's always something that we have to be mindful of too. But we are, we have some things in place that we have panels that include a minority that sits on the panel. We encourage, to open it up for everybody. We are doing lots of different things to recruit people, recruit and retain. That is our goal here at KDE.
All right, thank you. And then on the second page of the staff note, you have these two different sections, one KDE and then two, the Office of Career and Tech Ed. So our workforce at the School for the Blind and School for the Deaf are in that item number 1 segment.
That is correct.
Okay.
As you know, CTE, due to geographical reasons, they have less minorities. And I've heard you all talk earlier this week about, starting earlier, getting the students involved at an earlier rate. We just don't have that many teachers or people coming out for these jobs at the ATCs. So when they came over, we were instructed to keep a different staff note. So that's why you see one for CTE and one that we include central office and the Kentucky School for the Blind and the Kentucky School for the Deaf.
All right, very helpful. Thank you. Board members, do you have questions for Lynn? All right, Lynn, thank you so much. Robin, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and it looks like maybe I'm having a little bit of internet instability. If that's the case, my apologies. The next item on our review list is the financial report from Ashland Independent School District. I don't know if Superintendent Howard's here, but I'll turn it over to Robin and Che.
Thank you, Chair Young. And I'm going to turn it directly over to Che. Superintendent Howard is not going to appear with us today. We asked him to provide a written report to KDE staff. And so Che is going to report out on that for us. It is the beginning of the school year and superintendents are very, very busy. So we allowed him a little grace today. And Che will present on behalf of Ashland Independent. Che?
Che, I believe you're on mute.
I am. I was testing you, Chair Young, to make sure you're watching. Good
You
job.
just make me feel better.
So we got a few quick notes from Ashland, most of which are positive. They've done some Red Book training for staff, for principals and stuff, and this is always an audit item in a lot of districts. So we're glad to see that, and athletic directors, I should add, and bookkeepers. But probably the biggest thing I can see in this latest report is we collected their unaudited annual financial report maybe about a week ago. And they went from, if you'll recall, the reason they're here every board meeting is they had a 0.64% fund balance, or about $154,000. And they're unaudited, which of course has not been audited, but it gives a good reflection of what's coming. They're now at 11.32%. or about $2.3 million. This is way over great. We were very happy to see that. And I did speak with Mr. Wireman very briefly through email, and they're still doing a lot of cleanup of the books. So this number should change some, but I think it's a really good indicator that things are certainly looking better there. Their carry forward is about $1 million. Their budgeted contingency, which is a little bit different, is about 6%. These are all good. They've done some other district leadership training. They've done safe return to in-person instruction, of course. They are working on their ARP-ESSER spending plan. They have submitted their ARP-ESSER LEA plan to the department. And I believe the last I saw, let's see, Mr. Wireman and Mr. Green, these are both the finance people. Mr. Wireman is their consultant. Mr. Green is their current finance officer. Also continue to meet about weekly or often twice per week. And they survive a closeout, which is always a rough period for any new or old finance officer. July is a very rough month. And Mr. Green, we did get an email from him, and he is attending SFMI the other day. So he has survived his first closeout. So we're very glad to see that.
Excellent. And then we could expect audited financial reports and the audit probably around November.
Yes, those start coming in about November. It will take quite a while. We don't really close those out until probably February or March of the following year. But because of this, we'll be looking at audit probably, I would say, in November, December, sometime in that area there.
All right. Well, if Mr. Wyman or Mr. Howard are listening or have friends who are listening in, kudos, bravo, congratulations. And thank you so much for the direct support that you have provided, Robin and Che. Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Chair Young, I was going to, I did want to publicly thank Che and his team who have spent an awful lot of time with Ashland Independent. I'm just trying to get them back on the right path. I think as we learn more about their circumstance, we are very happy to learn while it was just someone that didn't really, quite frankly, know what they were doing. So we're glad that we have a finance officer that's there. We've got the appropriate supports around them, and it will certainly help their new school year start off a lot better.
Excellent. Great model of checks, balances, and safeguards. So nice work, team. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda is the hearing officer's report, statement of consideration with some procedural safeguards here. And I will turn this over to Todd Allen and Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. The typical hearing officer's report is loaded into the board portal for your review, so you can see where all of the board's regulations are in process. Of note today, you will see that 707 KAR 1340, Procedural Safeguards and State Complaint Procedures, the comment period closed on that on July 31st. And on the last day of the comment period, we did receive a comment from one individual in relation to that regulation. So that triggers a statement of consideration that's before the board now. And I believe that Associate Commissioner Hilton, as well as David Wickersham, are on the call to walk us through the statement of consideration. The agency, the recommendation to the board is to not make changes to the regulation based on those comments.
Hi, good afternoon. This is David Wickersham from the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. Thank you, Todd. I wanted to extend thanks to the Office of Legal Services and also to Dr. Brewer for helping us expedite the placement of this on the agenda for today's meeting. Because of filing issues, we needed to get this done promptly rather than waiting until the October meeting, and we appreciate their help in getting this before you and successfully completed. So we're here before you today on the final step before this regulation goes over to the General Assembly for final approval. There were essentially two primary themes in the written comment that we received. Most of the comments, most of the recommendations that were contained in the comment asked that the agency make changes to parts of the regulation that KDE had not proposed to modify or amend. So we're more generic in terms of asking for other changes that had not been contemplated at the time that you all had previously seen this regulation. The other theme that I think came up fairly consistently were that many of the recommendations were asking KDE to expand the safeguards that are contained in the regulation or add additional procedural rights for children with disabilities and their parents. And just by way of very quick overview, you'll recall that this regulation is in place because federal law requires Kentucky to adopt procedural safeguards for children with disabilities and their parents, and also to list the requirements for filing a written complaint. So that essentially is the background against which we're working here. The expansion of rights that was considered or that was suggested through the comment, expansions of those type would need to be made in the federal law that dictates that Kentucky have this sort of regulation in place. So because Kentucky does not want to essentially fail to align with federal law, the proper format for that would be that if the IDEA were to be modified, to be amended in that way, we would then follow suit by coming before you to ask for expansions of those rights that complied with federal law rather than initiating those at the state level, given that this is so thoroughly governed by federal law. I'm glad to address each of these with you point by point if you would like. If you find it to be more efficient and a better use of your time for me just to respond to any specific questions that you have, I'm glad to do that. So I'm sort of here at your pleasure in terms of how you'd like me to proceed.
Let's start and see if we have questions, David, that might take you back.
Okay.
To the item.
Okay.
Board members, you may recall some conversation about this regulation earlier in the process, and a lot of conversation at LSAC on the item as well.
Thank you, Chair Young. That's correct. I will point out, and this may make it easier as you look at the statement of consideration, none of the comments that came in, none of the suggestions that were made as part of this written comment hit on any of the points of discussion at LSAC or during earlier presentations of this regulation to the board. So there was no overlap between earlier conversation and the things that are contained here.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And board members, this was another late breaking item in order to meet the rigorous timelines required of the regulatory process, and that's why we're considering this statement today. But what questions might you have for David? Or I believe Greta's with us too.
So Chair Young, essentially, as I'm trying to really, it's pretty comprehensive, but essentially the comments that we got and the responses to those comments are all issues that, let's see, I'm just trying to make sure this is right and I'm understanding the explanation. These comments were not really relevant to issues at hand for the most part. Is that right?
I would address it this way, if I may. I believe that they were relevant in terms of advocacy for an expansion of some of the rights that inure to the benefit of children with disabilities and their families, but they're
Yes.
not things that were presently in the regulation that we were attempting to make
correct.
changes to. Yes,
Right,
ma'am.
right. All right. Thank you. That's
Thank you.
what I was understanding. So
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Any other questions? Allison, your brow looks knitted.
I'm deep in thought, Lou. I'm reading and rereading.
Exactly. All right.
Madam Chair, maybe another way to frame this is that the regulatory process is, of course, bound by federal and state law. And so those are the touchstones that we must go back to when it comes to any regulations that we make. So while there may be merit in the comments that were made, they exceed what's in federal or state law. And that's why many of them were rejected or not recommended.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much to the team for continuing to shepherd the process to the very end. And David, if you ever decide to get out of agency work, you have a future in late night radio or NPR. Your voice always reminds me that you would be a great DJ.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much. The next item on our review agenda is the litigation report. General Counsel Todd Allen.
Thank you again, Chair Young. The litigation report is posted to the board's secure portal because it's an attorney-client privilege document. All of the changes that have occurred in that report since it was last presented to you at our regular meeting appear in bold font. I don't believe there's any need for the board to go into closed session to discuss any matters or take action related to any matters at this time, but I will pause in the event that you all do have issues that you want to discuss.
Any questions or issues of a confidential nature to be discussed? All right, thanks so much for that running record too, Todd. At this we have an opportunity for board member sharing. I know we got to spend some time together yesterday, but do any board members have an item of a good news or information or perhaps questions that you would like to have answered? Now is the time to just unmute and jump right in. I see a hand. Let me see if I can find it.
I think it's me, Chair.
Oh, there. All of this is plus 20. Okay.
Just very quickly, I wanted to share something that happened very quickly. This summer, I took my grandchildren to the park and we looked across the way and saw the most beautifully decorated bus, most inviting looking bus sitting on the edge of the park in a parking lot. Well, my grandchildren immediately wanted to know where it was, and so let's walk over there. And I did see Warren County on it, but the decorations on the bus were so unique. And we walked over to it to find out what was going on. It was a mobile preschool classroom, and a preschool teacher, coordinator, traveled around the county and provided activities for parents and children. It was the perfect example of taking the world of education, the world of school, out to the community. And I was so proud to see it. I mean, I had to take pictures of the teachers standing in front of the bus, and I had to thank the bus driver, and they welcomed us onto the bus to look and see what was taking place. And the excitement and the enthusiasm I saw from the teacher, the bus driver, and the parents and the children who were involved was just a balm to my soul to know what's going on out within the community. So kudos for going the extra mile.
Excellent. I love that story. I love it. I've been hearing so many creative uses of refurbished and retrofitted school buses this summer. I love it. Other board members sharing?
Lou,
Yes.
Holly,
Holly.
was it Elizabeth Hack? Is that where we were supposed to go last night?
Yes, right.
I just want to say thank you to Elizabeth for opening your home to us. It's always, stressful and another layer of work to get ready for people to come over. And so even though we didn't get to come, maybe in the future sometime, but thank you for doing that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I texted her last night and so did Jason, but so kind of you to mention. Thank you.
Chair Young, I'd like to share a really uplifting experience I had on Tuesday when I attended the Deeper Learning Symposium organized by the Jefferson County Public Schools. But all of the content, the program, the work, the promotion, everything was done by the teachers and those instructional staff within the school district. And I just being there and experiencing their enthusiasm and welcome of really rich content about learning was just a balm to my soul. So when, COVID and some of the administrative issues can be pretty daunting, but when you get around teachers and they're talking about learning, you're guaranteed to have a uplift. So I just recommend that. And I was very proud to be in the midst of that celebration about learning and learning that is really taking on a high level of responsibility to get it done for all children.
Excellent. Yeah. And something like 2,000 attendees or something.
Yes.
Everything in Jefferson is a large scale endeavor. And I'm so glad that you all were able to attend. My team was there as well. All right, I think Ms. Sloan has something I need to let you know, board. We're not quite at the happy ending yet. I failed to ask for a motion and action on the statement of consideration, so I will go back and pick that up before we adjourn. Allison.
I have a couple of things if you all give me just a moment. I'd like to start first just by saying a huge thank you and leap of gratitude to Jamie Sparks and the Kentucky and National Organization of SHAPE for recognizing our governor and Soyana and myself and the board recently at their conference for and just being happy and showing the world how important student and teacher voice is in decision making. Very much appreciative of that. It was a great experience and opportunity to hear people talking about that and celebrating it. And people from other states stopped us because there were people there from across the nation. And I think they talked to Soyana as well. And they were just thrilled that we were doing this here in Kentucky. So I wanted to share that. They said they didn't have that in their states, and they were very glad to see that we were promoting and celebrating teacher and student voice. My second thing is I just really want to plead with our local districts. As we return to school, and some districts have returned to school, but as they're making their plans for a safe return, I really hope they reconsider for those that have not and those that are still making plans to mandate wearing masks. I think it's just a very simple sacrifice that we can all make to ensure our safety of our colleagues and of course, most importantly, our students. And getting our school year off to a good start and hopefully be able to keep our doors open this year. I know there's lots of things going around, lots of different comments being made by local board members and parents and teachers in our districts about various things, but they can mandate those in our local districts. And I really hope they consider that as they're making their plans, because it's a simple thing. I don't know how in the world you police those that are vaccinated versus vaccinated and wear masks, because, I'm starting a new year in a new school this year and I don't know these students. I don't know who's vaccinated. I don't know who isn't. I don't know how in the world you'd be able to walk down the hallway and know who should be wearing a mask and who shouldn't be, especially with their little ones. They can't wear, they can't be vaccinated. I just want us all to be safe. And I want a year of teaching my students in school. And I know our other teachers want that as well. So please consider that as you're making your decisions to go back to school.
Yeah, thank you so much, Allison. Let's not just get them back. Let's keep them there. Let's keep them there. Excellent. All right, board members, thank you so much, and thanks for your willingness to share these great stories and those words of genuine, thoughtful wisdom. So thank you. At this time, let's please go back to item 14, the statement of consideration for 703 KAR 5:270. And the motion to be considered based on the recommendation of the team would be to approve the statement of consideration without including the comment received during public comment. Do we have such a motion?
This is Sharon. I so move.
Thank you. We have a motion. Second.
It's Holly Bloodworth. I second.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions or considerations of this statement of consideration? Thank you. Meredith, would you please call the roll?
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
Holly Bloodworth, yes.
Jamie Bowling.
Jamie Bowling, yes.
Alvis Johnson.
Alvis Johnson, yes.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary, yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, yes.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, yes. Thank you so much. At this point, I would like to just riff on Allison's comment and wish all 650,000 of our learners a very happy 2021-22 school year. Happy New Year to all of you, to our educators, to our school leaders, to our families and our communities as we're about to embark on a very exciting new school year across the Commonwealth. Thanks, members, for 2 days, for your stamina, for your productivity, for your focus, your purpose, your heart, all of those amazing attributes that you bring to your service on this board. And at this point, I am open to a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt your procedure for just a moment and build on what you said. I just wanted to express my gratitude to you, members of the board, for your professionalism and flexibility and quickly transitioning and scattering to all four corners of Kentucky and picking right back up where we left off and then continuing today through that. So thank you, board members, for your flexibility and professionalism. And thank you also to all the folks at the department who helped make that happen. It really was a very seamless transition. We got all of the things that we needed done, and just a testament to the professionalism and dedication of everyone involved on this board and in supporting it. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm looking for my amen reaction button, but I can't seem to find it. So thank you. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Thank you, Ms.
Jamie
Bowling.
Bowling.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you. And on that, I think no further discussion required. Meredith, would you please call the roll?
Joanne Adams.
Joanne Adams, thanks everyone. Yes.
Claire Batt.
Claire Batt, thank you. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Yes.
Holly Bloodworth.
This is Holly Bloodworth. I vote yes.
Jamie Bowling.
This is Jamie Bowling. I vote yes.
Alvis Johnson.
This is Alvis Johnson. I vote yes. Congratulations, Chair Young and Vice Chair Robinson, for being reappointed for another term.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
Patrice McCrary.
Patrice McCrary. Everybody stay well. I vote yes.
Randy Poe.
Randy Poe, I vote yes.
Sharon Robinson.
Sharon Robinson, thanks for the honor of serving with you as your vice chair, and I vote yes to adjourn.
Lou Young.
Lou Young, thank you as well. Happy new school year, everyone. I vote yes. And if I still have